I've spent the last few days reading the long-awaited autobiography of Western Cape Premier Helen Zille. It's called Not Without a Fight. It is brilliant. It is extremely well written. Obviously, it looks at her life story, but also it gives interesting insights, staggering insights into the world of politics, opposition politics, ruling party politics. And the lady is here. Welcome to you, Helen Zille. Nice talking to you.
Hi there, John. I hope we can get through this interview without a fight.
We've had a few before,
Yeah,
I think we have.
have.
But we don't take it personally.
Never.
I was staggered when your mum, who I've fallen in love with, okay, I've fallen in love with your mum, your late mum, and my mum was 93 yesterday, by the way.
Congratulations, that's wonderful.
And when you said you were going into politics, she said, but Helen, you're far too sensitive. I was staggered about that. Tell us about you and your personality.
That's an interesting question. I am very sensitive, I think. But I did inherit from my mom the capacity to stand up on an issue of principle against all comers.
Yeah.
But the people that I love and that are close to me, I'm very sensitive for them, and I'm very sensitive about the relationship between us. And I also take things to heart a lot, and I had to develop a very thick skin as a politician. But a thick skin is something that you can develop. And eventually, when other people's opinions about you stop enabling you to define who you are, then you get over it, you know who you are, you get on with what you have to do, and it runs off you.
All right. If you had to do it again, would you do it very differently? Because it comes across in the book that when you started, I mean, you went from sort of, working at UCT into the leader of the province, etc. You served your time in the trenches, but you also then got into politics very, very quickly. Looking back now, would you have done things very, very differently to the way you've done them?
No, I wouldn't have, because you can't work out what you would have done in your life with hindsight. You have to deal with what you've got at the particular moment. And so at every particular moment, I would take a decision. Some were right, some were wrong. But I learned more from my mistakes than I did from my correct decisions. So I might never have been enabled to take correct decisions if I hadn't learned from mistakes I'd previously made. So life is a rich weave of mistakes, of good decisions, of bad decisions, of successes, of failures, and that's what my story has been.
Interesting. I've got a question. 15-year-old Luke Mount asks, Helen, where did your confidence come from? I've never seen anybody who exudes more confidence than you. I don't mean false, modest bravado, but from the inside out, you've got the stuff.
Well, Luke, that is a compliment, and something that I've had to develop over very many years. When I was a teenager, I wasn't particularly confident. I was good at debating, but that took a lot of preparation, a lot of work and time. I lost my confidence as a young adult completely, but one often has to go through dips in life to come out the other side. And slowly, knock after knock, and success after success, and failure after failure, you get to learn the lessons and move on. And that's the important thing. You have to learn the right lessons and move on. And the more you have to take pressure, and the more you get through every pressure cooker that you have to go through, the more able you are to take it the next time. So that's a very encouraging thing. Life puts you through a lot, but every single time you get through something, you're better able to take it the next time.
Is that why a number of times in the book you look at people like Lindiwe Mazibuko, you look at Musi Maimane, and you sort of said, my goodness, I hope they don't peak too soon. They mustn't go in too early. Is that because of the lessons you learned?
Yes, absolutely. There are stages in life for a very good reason. And one can be intellectually brilliant, as both of them are. One can be emotionally mature, as both of them are. But life's big E, experience, shapes you in a way that nothing else can prepare you for. And politics is so complex, and your understanding of human beings has to be deep and born of the University of Life, to coin a cliche. And so it's helped me enormously to have been through the things that I did before I became the leader of the party in my late 50s. So I do get worried about people peaking early, but of course, again, life doesn't ask you when you want to peak. You get your opportunities when they come, and you either use them or lose them.
But politics is so dirty. I could not believe it. I mean, I'm a talk show host, etc., and you deal with politicians, so you have a fair idea of what is going on. But behind the scenes, and this is with the DA, admittedly at times with the new Nats, etc., but I could not believe the egos, I could not believe the selfishness, I couldn't believe the lies, I couldn't believe the dishonesty. Is that what it's really about?
No, John, not always. There is that. But there are also the amazing people, the people who are in it for principle, the people who understand what it's going to take to make this country work and get a political foundation, a constitutional foundation entrenched. So there are amazing people in politics. Politics attracts extremes. It attracts people of high principle and vision, and it attracts people who really see a shortcut to power abuse and wealth accumulation, real opportunists. And you have the full mixture. And that is what the fight is about. It's one of those classic morality tales of good versus evil, although obviously no one's perfectly good and no one's perfectly evil. So it's a lot of greys in between. But it is the place where that comes out most starkly of any arena that I've experienced in life.
Tell us about, what did you call them? You called them that cabal. You talked about the cabal, in the Western Cape government. I mean, this was the days when there was this curious marriage between the new Nats and the DP, wasn't it, in those days? Tell us about that. And Tony Leon, in a way, I was disappointed by him at that stage.
Well, you've got to understand where Tony Leon was coming from. What we had to do as the DP, as a tiny party that started in 1994 with 1.7% of the vote, we had to build ourselves up to become the official opposition, which Tony did on his own, and then we had to move to becoming a party of government, which was the next big step. And we had to do that in time to prevent South Africa from enabling one party to accumulate too much power in too few hands, which would inevitably lead us to a failed state and what is now known as state capture, which we recognized all of those years ago. And so we believe that having beaten the New National Party quite substantially in 1999, it was time to swallow them up and move on to the next frontier of politics. But we didn't realize that swallowing them up would not close down that front of politics. We did not realize that what we would be doing would be internalizing the conflict. And what we had to come to terms with was that fighting an internal battle against people who didn't necessarily share your values was much harder than fighting an external battle with them in politics. And so we had to really battle for the value set of the DA. Many people who were once with the NNP really understand what our open, opportunity-driven philosophy is all about. They really deeply understand freedom, fairness, and opportunity, which is something that is not compatible with nationalism. And so I was very grateful to have been part of that lived experience of converting lots of people politically, but also seeing that you can't grow if you can't convert people.
Well, that comes through in the book. That section about the cabal was fascinating. We're in the studio with Helen Zille. Not Without a Fight is her new autobiography. Why did you release it now, Helen? Before you've gone, you're still Premier of the Western Cape. The country is still politically galvanized at the moment. Why not wait till you'd called it a day?
That's a good question, John. I don't think I'll call it a day for a long time if all goes well with me. I'll be working for this cause for many years, and the women in my family tend to go on a bit. So we need to be very grateful for term limits in this country. But you don't have to be in office to be working for the cause. Now, the reason that I did was that Penguin Random House approached me when I stepped down as the leader of the DA. And I said to them, I don't know whether this is the right time because I'm still Premier of the Western Cape. I'm still very involved formally in politics. And they said, no, now is perfect timing for this book. We would like to publish it soon, and they gave me an impossible deadline and told me to get going. And as an ex-journalist, you know that when you're given a deadline, you can't resist it. So I grabbed the opportunity and wrote it, and it did turn out to be a good replacement for having the original 2 jobs that I had. I suddenly had 1 job and felt quite bereft. So when I had to write a book, it was a really good filler for the times at 3 o'clock in the morning that I didn't know what to do with myself.
And you worked with Alison Lowry. You give her great credit. I mean, she's a lot of tragedy in her life, but what a wonderful person, eh?
She's an extraordinary person, and she's been really a wonderful wordsmith and writer and editor, and then Robert Plummer was too. I worked with two of the really great editors, Alison Lowry and Robert Plummer, and it was just a pleasure to work with both of them and to work with Penguin Random House.
Did you get legal advice? Because it's not an easy book. I mean, you stick the boot into some people. There's various people. We'll talk about some of them, and I won't spoil it. But there's certain people who I imagine will not be talking to you after this book.
Well, that's okay. One of the first lesson that you have to learn in politics is that you're going to be unpopular with a lot of people. And the second thing you have to learn is that your opponents accumulate and become enemies. And as Thabo Mbeki taught me, the coalition of the aggrieved comes back to haunt you. I know all of that, and I've experienced all of that. But I just had to tell the truth. I had one shot at telling the truth, and that's what I did. Now, what is the truth? It's a big and complex question, but this is the truth as I experienced it on the basis of facts, as I recorded them. And some people will have different interpretations of the events, but I am pretty sure that mine is close, very close, and as close to the truth as it's possible to get.
And we are getting SMS coming in. Please tell Helen she's our hero. She must never retire and means so much for South Africa. Say thank you, Helen. Mrs. Zille, you transformed the DA. You put the party above yourself. A true leader. Bravo. And somebody says, I remember you at Wits as someone struggling with anorexia. You seem to have slayed that demon. It's wrecked the life of my sister, just a year younger than you. How did you get through this problem? We'll talk about that coming up after the break. And somebody also says, I never knew she worked as a journalist and the Biko story until I read the book. Well, of course, we're not able to cover all of it, and it goes right the way through the story, but we'll continue talking to Helen Zille about her book, Not Without a Fight. Helen, anorexia, I mean, it must be difficult to talk about that. We've a lot of people asking questions. How did you get into it, and how did you beat it?
Well, I got into it by wanting to be slim, and there was a trigger moment that I describe in my book. It was what was known as the cattle parade at Fuller Hall at the University of Cape Town.
Yes.
And that is when the girls, in what was considered at the time to be a very liberated event, walked down a ramp with miniskirts, and the boys would bid for you.
Unbelievable, looking back today. Yeah.
Looking back today, it was hardly comprehensible. But then it was thought to be liberated. It was freedom from the puritanical Victorian norms that had applied in the past. And, I didn't have great legs. I still don't have great legs, but I worried about it at the time. And I don't worry about it today, which is the great liberation. So I wanted to get thin, and I went down to the shop and I bought a diet book, and I stuck to it absolutely rigorously. And I got thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until I was completely skeletal. But somewhere along the way, what happened was, I have no doubt that something biological was triggered. Because I think with that progressive starvation, I starved my brain of certain enzymes and chemicals, and then something completely irrational triggered. And that, I think, is the psychological condition of anorexia, which becomes extremely difficult to break. But I slowly did break it over many years. It took me a long time. I think about 8 years of my life was lost to that. But not really lost, because with unbelievable determination, I could survive through starvation and be functional, which looking back, I remember how difficult that was. But it also made me very, very tough. And slowly I got out of it by starting to eat again. It was small amounts of roughage that got my system working again. And then I felt more and more emboldened to try and be myself and not worry about what other people thought of me.
Did you nearly die?
Yes, I came very close, I think. Very close. My mother wouldn't let me go back to university in Cape Town because I was so weakened, and she thought if I got any kind of infection, then I wouldn't make it.
Unbelievable. The other stories that I found incredible were when you met President Zuma for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you find him one of the most charming people. Tell about the story of him dancing with you.
Well, it had been after a Lekgotla. I think it was the second Lekgotla that I went to, which is an extended cabinet meeting in which the premiers of the provinces are included. And everyone was there. It was ANC except me, who'd been the Premier of the Western Cape, who was the Premier of the Western Cape. And of course I still am, but I was up there in my capacity as Premier. And afterwards there was a function at his home in Pretoria, at his official home. And there was music and food, and he came up and asked me to dance. I was completely taken aback because I was talking to other people at the time, and he tapped me on the shoulder. And as I turned around, I could see he was asking me to dance. And I could see, by the way, he was standing ready to take me and sweep me off onto the dance floor. I realized he meant serious ballroom dancing, which, of course, I can't do. So
our generation never learned it, did they? Most, yeah.
Oh, and I did a complete double take looking at this. And I said, "Thank you, Mr. President, I can't dance." He said, "Don't worry about that. I will lead you." And then he proceeded, as a brilliant ballroom dancer, to sweep me across the floor, with me falling over my feet and tripping up the president. It was terrible. Anyway, he was very gracious and very warm about that. And he is a very charming person when you meet him personally. And he was always so charming to me that I felt bad having to criticize him as much as I did.
And there's also interesting stuff about Thabo Mbeki as well. Mbuyiselo is on the line. Mbuyiselo, hi, you're talking to Helen Zille. Morning.
Hi, good morning, Jordan. Good morning, Premier Helen Zille.
Hi, Mbuyiselo.
Hi, Helen. I'll tell you what, Helen, with hindsight, would you have, chosen all white male cabinet ministers in your province based on what's happening in the country, or, the patriarchy, the violence?
Okay, there's the question, because that comes up in the book as well.
Okay, well, first of all, Mbuyiselo, I never ever chose an all-white male cabinet. Never ever. My first cabinet was racially diverse. They were all males except me. And that was on the basis of the choice I had to make at the time from only 22 people available. I didn't have the choice of every woman in the Western Cape or South Africa, because people are free to put their names down for a list and get selected on a list, as the case may be. And I had to make the best fit I could between portfolios and the individuals, the 22 individuals that were available to me. I made that fit on the basis of CVs, on the basis of past experience, and as it turned out, they were a racially diverse mix of males. Now, obviously, that isn't ideal, and I should have paid more attention, but I wasn't the leader of the party at the time. But actually, I was the leader of the party at the time. I'm sorry, I was the leader of the party at the time. But I should have paid much more attention to getting a diverse list in the beginning. There are many, many women who stand for election in the DA, but most of them are chosen to go to national parliament and not the provincial parliament. And because we believe in free choice in the DA, I couldn't force people to be on the provincial list if they rather chose to be on the national list. So it was a confluence of circumstances which I was worried about and did think was wrong. But if I had to choose people on the basis of fitness to do a particular job at a particular time, because doing that job properly was the major criterion that would determine the quality of life for people who were being governed, then I made the choice to the best of my ability with the talent I had available.
Your reaction to that, because part of the book deals with the bad old days when your election results were poor, when the DA looked like it was going to be super, seeded by some of these new parties that came up. The recent local government elections where people, despite the race card being played, despite all sorts of allegations, where many, many people said, we actually do believe in a well-governed country with the rule of law in a non-racial society. You must have been thrilled at those results.
I was totally thrilled, John. It was the last year of unmatched racial toxicity. On social media.
Tell me about it.
Terrible. On our university campuses, or at least some of them for some of the time, especially on Twitter. And then suddenly these election results pour in that are telling us that South Africans do want a non-racial society, that are telling us that South Africans do want to build the rule of law under a constitution, that are telling us that South Africans do know that we sink or swim together, and that Twitter is not the electorate. That is a fantastic thing. So the number of South Africans who believe in non-racialism, who believe in the rule of law, who believe in building an economy, not destroying an economy, who believe that our institutions are crucial to transform and develop and strengthen rather than to destroy, those South Africans are in the majority, and that is extraordinarily encouraging.
You mentioned finally, and there's so much we haven't covered, the Denmark syndrome, that there are only 3 things needed to create a Denmark. Tell us about that briefly, because I found that fascinating. And so, somebody who gets confused by politics, to have a simplified like that made a lot of sense. Might be a good one to finish with.
Yes, well, I got that from Francis Fukuyama, who is a brilliant political scientist at Stanford University, who I've had the privilege of meeting, and I've also read his books. Now, he's written a book called The Origins of Political Order and Political Decay. In fact, it's a 2-volume book. But he comes with a very simple and compelling conclusion. He says very few countries in history have made the transition to orderly, safe, secure societies with economic opportunities for their members, keeping economic disparities limited, and ensuring that everybody has a chance in life. Very, very few countries have managed to do that. And he says that if he studies all of the attributes of all the countries that have either succeeded, very few of them, or failed, very many of them, he's come to the conclusion over all the millennia that there are 3 things required to succeed. One is a deep understanding and implementation of the rule of law.
Yep.
The second is a culture in a society of accountability, which is a very important concept, that you're responsible for your actions and need to be held accountable for your actions, and that especially people in power need to be held accountable for their actions. And the third is a capable state. He says that no society can make progress without a capable, competent state. And I've had the very great privilege in South Africa of being able to work towards the rule of law, accountability, and now in government, the capable state.
Do you remain optimistic?
Oh, completely optimistic. I think we're closer now to having a viable and sustainable democracy than we were in 1994.
Fantastic. Helen Zille, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Congratulations on the book. It's a book everybody should read.
Thank you very much, John. I've really enjoyed it.